In this video I'm going to be showing you how to put together an ultra cheap Hackintosh for around $300 or €300 from new parts that can run macOS Ventura flawlessly. As Mac prices continue to increase, a Hackintosh is by far the cheapest way to get into using macOS. For around €300 you can build a Hackintosh that will run macOS Ventura with performance comparable to a Mac that Apple are selling today on their website for over $1,500. In this video I'm going to be showing you the parts I chose for the build, the installation process and some performance benchmarks. If you're interested in building one yourself, links to all of the parts and the programs used will be down in the video description. First, for the CPU, I've gone with an Intel Core i3-10105. This 10th gen CPU has 4 cores and 8 threads running at 3.7 GHz. It's only about 2% faster than the older i3-10100, but the price difference was only €1.50. 10th generation Intel CPUs work out of the box in macOS Ventura, and the integrated UHD 630 graphics are supported by Metal 3. Having a CPU with compatible integrated graphics is essential, since the €300 budget doesn't stretch to a dedicated graphics card. The power supply I chose is a 600 watts EVGA-W1 with 80 plus white certification. This cost €39 from Amazon. I could have gone with a cheap no-name brand PSU for €20, but when it comes to PSUs, I prefer to stick with reliable brands I'm familiar with. 600 watts of power means that I can add a GPU like the RX 6600 at a later date without any power issues. The case is a Knox Hummer Zero in pure white with a tempered glass side panel. This case was also €39 and features a modern, clean, minimalist design with plenty of space for additional storage and future expansion. For the RAM, I got 16GB of Kingston Fury Beast DDR4 3200. I could have gone with 8GB, but 16 allows for much better performance in memory-intensive apps like Final Cut Pro and Lightroom. Although it's DDR4 3200, it's only going to be running at 2666 MHz in this computer because of the H410 chipset. But if I upgrade to a Z490 motherboard in the future, then I can reuse the RAM and run it at the full 3200 MHz. For the motherboard, I went with an MSI H410M-A Pro. I got this motherboard for €47 because the I/O shield was missing, but I got a 3D printed I/O shield to use instead. It has one PCI Express x16 slot so I can add a GPU at a later date, 4 SATA 3 ports, one M2 slot for an NVMe SSD, and a second M2 slot for a Wi-Fi card. So in future I can use a cheap adapter from Amazon and plug in an original Apple Wi-Fi card for native wireless. And finally, the SSD, where I'm going to be installing macOS Ventura, is a 256GB Patriot P300 NVMe drive. I got this on Amazon for only €19. I already reviewed this drive in another video and was very pleased with the performance considering the price. It peaks at around 2280 MB per second for read and 1785 for write. So those are the parts. The total cost came to €307. Just a little short of my target of €300. I could have saved around €20 by going for a cheaper case, another $20 by choosing a cheap PSU, and $27 by going with 8GB of RAM instead of 16. This would have brought the total cost down to around $240, but it would have been a less attractive and less capable machine as a result. With the parts all bought, it's time for the build. I've sped this part of the video up for the sake of brevity. As you may have noticed, I added a couple of Patriot SATA SSDs that I had laying around, one for installing Windows and the other to use as an editing drive, but these are optional and not needed to build a working Hackintosh. With the PC built and posting, it's time to install macOS Ventura. The first step is to use another Mac or another working Hackintosh to download macOS Ventura from the App Store. If you don't have access to the App Store, you can also download it directly from Apple's own content delivery network. I'll put a link for Ventura down in the video description. After downloading, take a USB flash drive at least 16GB in size and format it in Disk Utility. Select the drive in the pane on the left and click Erase. Choose a name for the drive. I'm just going to call mine Ventura. The format should be macOS Extended, and you can leave the scheme as GUID partition map. Once it's been formatted, open a terminal window and use Create Install Media to create a bootable installation drive by typing sudo /applications/install /macOS ventura.app/contents/resources/create install media --volume/volumes/ and then the name of your USB drive. You can find this command on the Apple website, which I'll link below, so you can just copy and paste it. This will take a while to complete depending on the speed of your drive. Once it's done, it's time to create our EFI folder, which is where the OpenCore bootloader and all of the drivers and files needed for the Hackintosh to boot are stored. For this build, I've decided to use a pre-made EFI from Olorilla.com. On the Olorilla website, click the link to download the desktop Comet Lake EFI. After it's downloaded, double click on the zip file to decompress it and then go into the Kexts folder under EFI, OC Kexts. This EFI comes with several unneeded Kexts, so I'm just going to select the ones I don't need, drag them to the trash and then empty it. I've kept Apple ALC for audio, Whatever Green for graphics, Intel Mousy for Ethernet, Lilu, Virtual SMC and the 2 USB Kexts. That's all I need. Now we need to download OpenCore Configurator, which I'm going to use to mount the USB stick's EFI partition and make a couple of changes to the config.plist file. Go to the OpenCore Configurator website, which I'll link down below, and click on the download button. Once it's downloaded, open your downloads folder and double click on the zip file to decompress it. Then drag the icon into your applications folder. Right click on the OpenCore Configurator icon, select open and then click open again. Now to mount the USB stick's EFI partition, click the icon that just appeared in the menu bar, find the USB drive in the list and click on Mount Partition, then enter your password. You should see the EFI icon appear on your desktop. Double click on it to open it. Then copy across the entire EFI folder from your downloads onto the EFI partition of the USB drive. Now we need to make a few changes to the config.plist. Inside the EFI partition you just copied, click on EFI, then OC and then double click the config.plist file to open it in OpenCore Configurator. You may see a message about it being the wrong version, since Olorilla's EFIs rarely use the most recent version of OpenCore. You can dismiss this message for now, as you can update OpenCore later once the Hackintosh is working. First, select Kernel on the left and in the list of Kexts, select all of the unneeded Kexts you just deleted and click on the minus to remove them. Next, select NVRAM on the left and click on the third hexadecimal number down under UUID. On the right, next to boot args, change ALCID equals 1 to ALCID equals 11. This is the audio layout for the onboard Realtek audio on the motherboard. Then, immediately after, type a space followed by IGFX on LN equals 1. This will prevent the screen from going black after booting. Finally, select Platform Info on the left. Click in the drop-down box next to Check Coverage and select iMac 20,1 as the Mac model. This is the closest real Mac to the hardware I'm using, since it also had a 10th Gen Intel CPU with UHD 630. Now click the Generate button at the top next to Serial Number to generate a new serial number. And then click Check Coverage at the bottom. This will take you to the Apple website. Complete the captcha code, then hit Enter and you'll see the warranty status for the serial that was just generated. If it has a green tick next to Valid Purchase Date, then that serial is already in use, so you should avoid it. Go back to OpenCore Configurator and click Generate again, and then click Check Coverage. Keep repeating this until you get a result like this. You should see a red message saying we're unable to check coverage for this serial number, which means it's free for you to use. Now you can save the plist by going to File, then Save and quit OpenCore Configurator. The drive's now ready to be plugged into the Hackintosh to begin the installation. First, there are a couple of changes to be made in the BIOS. Plug in the USB drive, turn the computer on and hit F2 as it powers on to enter the BIOS. Make sure that the BIOS mode is set to UEFI. Initiate graphics adapter should be set to IGP and the shared memory should be set to the maximum 64 MB. Change the boot priority so that the USB flash drive is first. And finally, make sure that secure boot is disabled. After saving changes, the computer will restart and begin to boot from the USB drive. You'll see the macOS recovery screen with options to restore from Time Machine, install macOS Ventura or run Safari or disk utility. Select Install macOS Ventura and then choose your SSD. From here on, the installation process is just as it would be on a real Mac. The computer reboots a couple of times during the install process, but OpenCore will automatically choose the right drive to boot from to continue the installation. After around 20 minutes to half an hour, the installation's finished and we can see the select language screen. Go through the initial setup steps and we're into a fully working macOS 13 Ventura. The last thing to do is to mount the FE partitions for both the internal SSD and the USB flash drive and copy the FE folder from the flash drive onto the SSD. This allows the Hackintosh to boot directly from the SSD without the flash drive needing to be plugged in. And that's it, we're done. Now let's take a look at performance. When using professional applications, I was surprised by just how well this computer performs. Everything is smooth and responsive. Video editing in Final Cut Pro is a breeze even when editing 4K, and editing photos in Lightroom is just as usable. In Geekbench 5, this machine scores 1154 for single core and 4559 for multi-core. That's about 10% faster in single core than the 2018 Core i5 Mac Mini, and only 2% slower in multi-core. It's also comfortably faster than both the i5 and i7 variants of the 2020 13-inch MacBook Pro in multi-core performance. In Geekbench 5's OpenCL test, the Hackintosh scores 4788, and in the Metal test it scored 4436. These scores are basically identical to the 2018 Mac Mini since it shares the same UHD 630 graphics. Apple still sells the 2018 Mac Mini on their website for €1,359, and that's for a model with only 8GB of RAM. If you bring the RAM up to 16GB, the same as the Hackintosh, then you have to pay an extra €230, bringing the total to $1,589. That's more than 5 times the cost of this Hackintosh for near identical performance. But it's not just about the performance now, it's also about the potential to upgrade. You can have up to 6 SSDs, you can upgrade the CPU to an i5, i7 or i9, upgrade the RAM to a maximum of 64GB, or add a dedicated GPU. These are all options that real Macs don't have. Adding a €400 RX 6600 XT will give you graphics performance in Metal that comfortably beats Apple's 64-core M1 Ultra. That's a €2,760 upgrade option on the already expensive Mac Studio. Or you could add a cheap, used RX 560 that beats the 8-core M1, and the total cost would still be under $400. And finally, of course, you can install Windows 10 or 11 on another SSD to boot into for gaming, giving you 2 machines for the price of 1. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. That's it for now, thanks for watching.